We continue now at the top of Daf Chav Daled Amud Aleph from Meseches Zevachim. This is Zevachim Daf 24a. On the previous summit, the Gemara was discussing the halacha in the Mishnah that if a Kohen is sitting and doing the avoda, so the avoda is profaned, the avoda is disqualified. And the Gemara asked, why don't we say that in a situation where the Kohen is sitting, essentially we consider him to be like a zar, and we should say Ma'amotzinu, just like we find by a zar, by a non-Kohen, that there's a penalty for doing the avoda. The penalty is the penalty of death. Again, it's misa b'dei shamayim. So the same should be true in a situation where the Kohen is sitting down. We should say it's exactly like a zar, exactly like a non-Kohen, and the punishment should be misa b'dei shamayim. And on the previous summit, the Gemara answered that when it comes to shelo rochotz yadayim v'raglayim, let's say of a Kohen who didn't wash his hands and his feet, and mechusar begadim, let's say of a Kohen that's not wearing all the big day kahuna. So in those cases, there is a punishment of misa, and that becomes shnei ksuvim haboim ke'echad. It's two psukim that teach the same thing, and the Gemara now continues and says, "V'chol shnei ksuvim haboim ke'echad ein melamdin." Anytime you have shnei ksuvim haboim ke'echad, you can't learn from there. Essentially, the Torah is saying that it's true in this case, and then it's true in this second case, and it's not true in any other case. And we'll take a look at Rashi, but we're going to use the Shinuya Nuschos version of Rashi. And the Shinuya Nuschos version of Rashi is the Tarvayu Machli Avoda. Both of them, again talking about Mechusar Begadim and talking about Shelo Rachatz Yadayim V'Raglayim, both of those profane, they desecrate the avoda is disqualified. Uchsiv behu misa, and it's written misa, k'de'isa b'Sanhedrin, like it says in Sanhedrin. And then Rashi says, v'hu adinami dahavi motzi l'meimar, mishum dahavi zar. Now the Gemara also could have said that zar and v'shalo rachatz yadayim v'raglayim shnei ksum haboim ke'echad. The Gemara could have said that zar and shalo rachatz yadayim v'raglayim are shnei ksum haboim ke'echad in terms of misa, and you can't learn. But because the mechusar begadim gufe, because mechusar begadim itself, lo ksiv be misa, doesn't actually write misa over there. Elam mishum de zaru, it's really just because that is a case of zar. V'chadam inayu naked, and so therefore the Gemara just chose one of those, but it could have said it that way as well. We'll take a look at the way it's written in our Rashi, slightly differently. Shnei ksuvin haboim ke'echad v'tarvayu ksiv kroi l'misa. By both of them, there are psukim written about death. B'Sanhedrin be'Elohen hanisrafin, this is in Sanhedrin. V'tuva kashali, and according to this version, Rashi says it's very difficult to me. V'tuva kashali begavai, I have difficulty over here. Chada demalo lilmod mehen, how can you learn from them? Hamisa begufa ksiv, tekevan dezarhu v'hazar hakarev yumas, to hamachusar begadim nami hachi afinan lei b'Sanhedrin. Rashi essentially saying mechusar begadim also is really learned out from the fact that is zar. Ein bigdayan alein, ein kunasan alein, that if they're not wearing their garments, they don't have their kahuna upon them. V'havalu zar, and essentially that's learned from the fact that it's considered like a zar. V'yod, and further, imkain chilul avod, if you're going to start making arguments like this, so maybe when it comes to the profaning of the avoda, the fact that when the Kohen is sitting down, we say the avoda is disqualified, lo neilef mine, we shouldn't be able to learn that either, because you have many psukim about chilul, and we should say it should be essentially like a shnei ksum haboim ke'echad ein melamdin. And the Gemara continues, Ulaman Damar Melamdin, and even according to the one who says that we can learn from Shnei Ksuvim Haboim Ke'echad, so then again we are back to our question over here by Yoshev, why is there no Chiv Misa? But we'll say as follows, Shesuya Yayin, there's also the case of Kohanim who drink wine, they cannot do the Avoda, Havalei Shlishi, that would be a third example of a penalty of death, Ushlosha L'divrei HaKol, and when you have three cases, everybody agrees, Ein Melamdin, they do not teach, you cannot learn from that, and so again, that's why by Yoshev we say there is no death penalty. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Omed al gabe kelim al gabe behema al gabe ragle chavero pasul. If the Kohen is standing on top of vessels, on top of an animal, on top of the feet of his friend when he's doing the avoda, so then the avoda is disqualified. And the Gemara says, Minolan, from where do we know this? Tetana devei Rabbi Yishmael, because it was taught in the yeshiva of Rabbi Yishmael, Hoel v'ritzba mekadeshes, since the floor of the Azara, it's mekadeshes, it sanctifies, uchlei shares mekadshim, and also the klei shares, the vessels of the Beis HaMikdash, they sanctify. Ma kli shares, just like by the kli shares, lo yehi davar chotzetz, beino levein kli shares, there should be nothing separating between him and the kli shares, between the Kohen and the kli shares. Af ritzba, so too the floor of the Azara, lo yehi davar chotzetz, beino levein haritzba, there should be nothing separating between him and the floor. And the Gemara continues with tzrich, it's necessary to teach all the cases in the Mishnah, meaning standing on vessels, standing on an animal, standing on the feet of his friend, the iashmin on kli, because if it only taught us a vessel, mishum delav mina de basar ninu, because that's not a kind of flesh, and so it's obvious that that's a separation. Avol behema, but an animal, demina de basar, that's also a kind of flesh. Eimalo, so I might say that's not a chatzitz, that's not a separation. V'yashmin on behema, and if it only taught Tzaras Behema de Lo Mina de Adam, who that's not a kind of person. Avol Chavero, but his friend, the Adam, who is a person. Eimalo, I would say no, that's not a separation. So Tzricha, it's necessary for the Mishnah to teach that all of these cases are separations. And the Gemara continues, Tanya, we learned in a Brayso, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Eliezer says, Raglo achas ala kli, let's say one of his feet is on the vessel, V'raglo achas ala ritzban, one of his feet is on the floor, Raglo achas ala ha'evan, if one of his feet is on a stone, V'raglo achas ala ritzban, one of his feet is on the floor. Rowan, we see, Kol she'ilu yinotel hakli, if it's a situation where if we would take away the vessel, V'tinotel ha'evan, or if we would take away the stone, Yochol lamod al raglo achas, he'd still be able to stand on one foot, V'yavod, and do the avoda, so then really essentially he is standing on the floor, avodaso ksheira, then his avoda is kosher. V'im lav, and if not, avodaso psula, then his avoda is disqualified. And the Gemara continues, boy, Rabbi Ami asks, Nedaldo ha'evan, let's say the stone of the actual floor itself comes loose, v'yamad aleh, and he stands upon that, mahu, what's the halacha? And the Gemara explains, hecha de'in daito l'chabra, if he doesn't have any intention to reattach it to the floor, lo tiboylach, that's not even a question. Devadai chaytza, that is certainly a separation. Ki tiboylach, the question is, the daito l'chabra, when he has in mind that he's going to reattach it to the floor. So what would be the halacha? Kevan the daito lechabra, since he has intention to attach it, kemodem echabra dami, it's like it is attached and it's not a separation. Odilmor, maybe hashtamiyo hatalisha, right now it is detached, and therefore we would say it is a separation. And the Gemara continues, Rabbazuti boy lohachi, Rabbazuti, he asks the question as follows, boy Rabbi Ami, that Rabbi Ami asks, nekro ha'evan, let's say the stone comes loose completely, v'yamad b'mekom, and he stands in its place, now he's standing on the earth, there is no stone there anymore, mahu, what's the halach in that situation? And the Gemara continues, my kami boile, what exactly is the question? Ki kaddish David ritzba el yona kaddish, did David HaMelech just make the upper part of the floor, the stones, holy? Oh, Dilmar, maybe, adli aristit tahoma kaddish, maybe all the way to the depths of the earth is considered holy. But the Gemara continues and asks, if that is the question, v'tiboile kol ha'azara kula, then you might as well ask about the whole azara. Let's say all the stones are removed from the azara. Does it lose its kedusha? And so the Gemara therefore says, Leolam pshita le da'ad aris t'tahoma kaddish. Really, it's obvious to him that the kedusha goes all the way to the depths. That's not the question. V'hachi kami boile, and here the question is, when he's standing on the area with no stone, the real question is, derech sheirus bekach, is this a proper way of sheirus, of serving in the Beis HaMikdash, or ein derech sheirus bekach, or this is not the way to serve? And the Gemara says, the Gemara leaves that as a question. And Rashi explains, Hoel v'ritzva mekadesha, since the floor sanctifies, lamod l'sharis, to stand and to serve. Sharei David kitsha b'shtei todos uv'shir shel pegoim, because David sanctified the floor of the Azara with 2 todos, 2 carbon todas, and the shir shel pegoim, which is literally translated as the song of the demons, or the song of the plagues. Kedamrinan lekaman b'shmaitan, like we'll say later on, ki kodesh David, that David sanctified. Uchlei sharis mekadeshen, and also the klei sharis are mekadesh, they sanctify. Kedechsiv, it's written, vayim shachem ve'kadesh Osam, he anointed them and he sanctified them. Lo yehei davar chotz, it's been kohen l'chlisharis. There should be nothing separating between the kohen and the klisharis. Bekabolas hadam, that's talking about when the kohen receives the blood. Kedechsiv, like it's written, v'lokach hakohen, the kohen takes shetehei lekicha bi'atzmo shel kohen. The kohen himself, so to speak, has to take. Utzricha, and then the Gemara said it's necessary lemisni v'masnisin, to teach in the Mishnah chatzitzas kelim uvehema v'regel chavero, the separation of vessels, the separation based on the animal, the separation from the feet of his friend, lefi haseder shenishnu ba, according to the order that it's taught in the Mishnah. Delav mina de besar adam, who it's not a kind of flesh of a person. V'kevan de'eno mimin adam klal, since it's not at all from the species, so to speak, of person. Have a min b'she'eno mino v'chotzes, that's like a kind with something not of the same kind, and that's more chance to create a chatzitza. And Rashi continues, Raglo achas al ha'evan, 1 foot is on the stone, shemutelas al haritzba, v'ena min haritzba, meaning a stone that's just on the floor, it's not part of the floor. And then the Gemara said, Nedaldala evan achas me avonea, let's say one of the stones comes loose from the floor, mikviusa, it's no longer fixed there, umisnanes beritzba, and it's moving around on the floor. Nedaldala lakanu lakan, it's moving this way, that way. And nekra is lagamri, nekra means it's totally uprooted. V'haguma nirasham, you could actually see the hole over there, you see the earth. V'yamad beguma v'yavad, he stands in the hole, and he serves in that fashion. And then the Gemara said, Ki kaddish David shayim mekadesh osa b'shtei todos uv'shir shel pegoyim, again Rashi repeats, repeats that he was Mekadesh it with the two Todos and the Shir Shel Pagoyim, Kinan b'Meseches Shvuos, as is learned in the Mishnah in Meseches Shvuos. And then the Gemara said, Tiboy le kol azara kuli, you might as well ask about the whole azara if that's the case. Shenitlo ritzba shalo, let's say the floor was taken away. You can ask whether it has the Kedusha. And finally, the Gemara explained that the question is, Derech Sheirus Bekach, is this the way to serve? Mihavi Orech Ara, is this the proper Derech Eretz of serving? Umikri Sheirus, and then that would be called Sheirus, that would be called serving, Olo or not. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Kibel bismol pasul, if he receives with his left hand, meaning the Kohen receives the blood with his left hand, it's pasul, that avodah is disqualified. For Rabbi Shimon machshin, Rabbi Shimon says that it is kosher. And the Gemara says, Tanu Rabbanon, the rabbis taught, be'etzba, it says with his finger. We'll take a look at the full pasuk. The full pasuk says, V'lokach ha-Kohen midam ha-chatos, the Kohen takes from the blood of the chatos, that refers to the Kabbalah, the receiving of the blood. And then it says, be'etzba'o, with his finger. V'nos al karnos mizbach ha'olah, and then he places it, that would be essentially the application of the blood, the zrika, he places it on the corner of the mizbach ha'olah, on the corner of the outer mizbeach. And so the Gemara says again, Tanu Rabbanan be'etzba, the rabbis taught, it says in the pasuk be'etzba, with the finger, v'lokach, and he takes, melamid shalote kabbalah ela b'yamin, that shows that the kabbalah should be with the right hand, the receiving of the blood. And then it says be'etzba v'nosan, it also says be'etzba, the word be'etzba, that same word be'etzba is going on v'nosan as well, the application of the blood. Melamid shalote nesina ela b'yamin, this shows that the nesina should be with the yamin, with the right hand. Again, in the pasuk, the Gemara essentially is saying, the Tanakam is saying, that the word v'lokach over here, the word be'etzbo goes on that, and then the word v'nosan as well, which comes after be'etzbo applies to that as well. That's the opinion of the Tanakama in this brisa. Amar Rabbi Shimon, now the brisa continues. Rabbi Shimon says, V'chinemra yad be'kabbalah, does it say the word yad by the receiving of the blood? Ela be'etzbo v'nosan. No, what it says is, it says be'etzbo v'nosan. It says with the finger that he applies it. Shalotei nesina ela b'yamin. It means that the nesina should be with the right hand. Hoel v'lo nemra yad be'kabbalah, but since it doesn't say yad by the receiving of the blood, that's why we make a distinction between the receiving and the application. Kibel b'smol kosher. If he receives it with the left hand, then it is kosher. And Rashi explains, be'etzbo v'lokach, again it says be'etzbo v'lokach, which is the receiving. Techsiv v'lokach ha'kohen midam ha'chatos be'etzbo v'nosan al karnos hitilu ha'kosav le'etzba bein kabbalah l'zrika. The word etzba is in between kabbalah and zrika. Darsheyu lefanav u'liachrav. So we darshan it both before and after. Lomar shalo yiyu elabimin, to say that both of them are with the right hand. Tialfinan lekaman b'shmaitin, we are going to learn later on in the sugya, kol mokom shenemar etzba eino elayamin. When it says the word etzba, it always means the right. And then Rabbi Shimon responds, v'chi nemra yad b'kabbalah, does it say yad by the receiving? Kasal kadaitach, right now we think, dim nemra b'yad, if it would have said yad, have Rabbi Shimon modeba, Rabbi Shimon would admit. Avol be'etzba lo yalef b'yamin, but the word be'etzba, that's not enough to learn the right hand. Lakaman boy lo mishanin and lo. Rashi says later the Gemara is going to ask about this and give an answer. Ella be'etzbo v'nasan, but it says be'etzbo v'nasan b'hamodina. For that, Rabbi Shimon says, I admit, b'hamodina lach, I admit to you, the zrikas chatos boyimin, that the zrika by a chatos does require the right, even though the Kabbalah does not, the zrika does. And the Gemara continues and asks for Rabbi Shimon. Now, according to the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, mimon of shach, either way we look at it, we should have a problem. If he holds of the gezerah shava, ki lo nemra yad beKabbalah, my have it. Then even if it doesn't say yad by Kabbalah, what difference does that make? Vi lesle gezerah shava, and if he does not hold of the gezerah shava, ki nemra yad beKabbalah, my have it. If it says yad beKabbalah, what difference does that make? And Rashi explains, Rabbi Shimon Da'amar, Rabbi Shimon who says, he have ksiv bo yad. Rabbi Shimon is implying that if it would have said yad, have a yolif lo yamin, that he would learn yamin, umay etzba lo yolif, but he's not learning it from etzba. That's what it sounds like Rabbi Shimon's argument is. So mimon of shach, either way, he is like gzeira shava di alfin on yad de kmitza mi mitzora. If he has the gzeira shava learning the word yad from kmitza, you're going to learn that the word yad of kmitza from mitzora. Techsiv be al boen yodo hayemonis, by the mitzora it says yodo hayemonis, it says the right hand. So af kol mokom shenemar yad ein ela yamin. So then you'll say that anytime that it says yad, it means the right. So then ki lo nemar yad beKabbalah, I have if it doesn't say yad by the Kabbalah. What difference does it make? Hare nemar bo etzbo, but it does say the word etzba. It says his finger. V'neilef etzba nami mehasam. So you can learn etzba from over there as well. Techsib mitzora, because it's written by mitzora. V'taval hakohen as etzbo hayemonis. It says etzbo hayemonis, meaning The Gemara's question, according to the way Rashi understands, is that if he holds of the Gezerah Shaveh, so then what difference does it make? Even if it doesn't say the word Yad, but it says the word Etzba, and the Gezerah Shaveh can work for Etzba as well. And V'i Lesle Gezerah Shaveh, if he doesn't hold of the Gezerah Shaveh, you can learn from Mitzorah. So even if it said Yad, it wouldn't make a difference because we're not making the Gezerah Shaveh, so we don't know that the word Yad means right hand. That's the Gemara's question on Rabbi Shimon. And the Gemara continues and answers, Amar Rav Yehuda says, Liolam les le Gezerah Shaveh. Really, Rabbi Shimon does not hold of this Gezerah Shaveh. V'hachi kamar, and this is what he's saying. V'chi nemar Yad Yamin beKabbalah. Does it say Yad Yamin by Kabbalah? Does it say the right hand by receiving the blood? Hoel v'lo nemar by Yad Yamin beKabbalah. Since it doesn't say the right hand by Kabbalah, Kibel b'smol kasher. So therefore, if he receives it with the left hand, it is kasher. The Gemara says to that, Amalei Rabba said to him, Yachi, if so, Afilo Nisinanami, make the exact same argument by the application of the blood. It doesn't say the right hand. V'yoden further, V'chi Leslie Rabbi Shimon Gezerah Shaveh. Does Rabbi Shimon really not hold of the Gezerah Shaveh? V'atanya, but we learned in a brisa. Rabbi Shimon says, Kol mokom shenemar Yad. Anytime it says Yad, Eina Eli Yamin, it means the right. And Etzba, if it says the word Etzba, Eina Eli Yamin, it means the right. And so therefore, Elo Amar Rava, rather Rava says, Liolam Isle Gezerah Shaveh. Really, Rabbi Shimon does hold of the Gezerah Shaveh. V'hachi kamar, and this is what he's saying. V'chi nemra Yad beKabbalah. Does it say Yad by Kabbalah? Hoel v'lo nemra Yad beKabbalah. Since it doesn't say Yad by Kabbalah, Ella Etzba uses the word finger over here in the pasuk. V'i evsha leKabbalah beEtzba. You can't receive blood with a finger. So therefore, it doesn't go on the receiving. So kibel b'smol kasher. Therefore, if he receives with the left hand, it is kasher. And Rashi explains, Elam Rava, rather Rava says, Liola Misle Gezerah Shaveh, he holds of the Gezerah Shaveh. V'hachi kamar, and this is what he's saying, V'chi nemar bo Yad beKabbalah. Does it say Yad by Kabbalah? You have a kos of Yad, if it said hand, Shahaya Ru'uya Lechos Bekli, a hand can be used to hold a vessel, or Lekabel Hadam, to receive the blood, Hu Ikol Amidrash Nami HaKabbalah, then you could say it's going on Kabbalah also. V'hoel v'lo nemar kan Yad, but since it doesn't say Yad over here, Ela Etzba, it says the finger. V'yevshel Lekabel Dam Bechli you can't receive blood in a vessel with just the finger. So it must be that it's really because of the application of the blood that it says etzba, shehu roila, because there you can apply the blood with the finger. V'lo misham kabbalah, nothing to do with receiving. Nimsa sha'af etzba lo nemar bo, therefore even etzba is not said by kabbalah. Lafikach kibel b'smol kasher. Therefore, if he receives with the left hand, it is kasher. But the Gemara continues and asks, Amar le Rav Sama b'reider Rav Ashi l'Ravina. Rav Sama, the son of Rav Ashi, asked Ravina, Evshar diyavid le ozen lisfas mizrak. Isn't it possible to make a handle for the rim of the bowl? Umekavel ban, you would be able to receive even using a finger. What do you mean you can't do Kabbalah with the finger? And so the Gemara continues, Elo Amar Abaya, rather Abaya says, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Chavdalid Amid Beis.